Hello, Jax West from Stephen Avery Project. Justice with Jax, MAM Gossip. I guess I could also say Free Marty. I'm a little early because I'm just sitting here anyway. So I figured I would just start it early because it takes people time to get here anyway. So I would just come on now and people can get on. And then when we hit 10 a.m., I would officially start. Unless I'm frozen. Okay, I was frozen on my screen for a second. So, I'm not sure what all I'm going to be doing today. There may be two lives. I think there'll be two lives. Oh, look, you can see the top of my banner over here. Hi, Denise. Um, so I didn't zoom in properly, so you didn't see the wrong way, top of the banner. Um, so since this live is scheduled to go over my book, we will focus on the book. So I'm thinking from for the first hour, I will just read my book, and then when that hour is up, I will end that live and do a second live today that we'd go right into it to talk about Stephen's brother Earl, because I have notes here that I took yesterday when I was talking. Stephen called me because he knew I was going live today, and so he wants me to talk about his brother Earl. And so, since I already said we would start reading my book today, that's what we're going to do. So, we're going to read my book now, and then we will do a live where I discuss stuff about Earl. And Melissa Kaluzinski, you can see Justice for Melissa. Um, Melissa Kaluzinski called me this morning. And the reception was really bad. And so she asked me if she could call me back. And I told her that I had to do a live. And so she said she's going to call me back at noon. So the second live, I'll just be live then until Melissa calls me. And then I would have to end it. So, and then I want to go for a walk because it's supposed to be 70 degrees here today in Chicagoland. Melissa is in southern Illinois, and she told me it's going to be in the 80s down there. And when I talked to Steven yesterday, he said it was nice up there in Wisconsin. So, yay, spring. I also made this live. I'm doing all the lives now. Um, where you have to be a follower here to comment. And let me remind everybody that this is a supporter page. Guilters, your posts will be deleted and you will be banned. While you're free to have that opinion, you post it elsewhere. We're not getting into that here. Since this live is me reading my book, I'm going to be looking down and reading. So I will not see many of your comments unless I, glance up. So if you have any questions, and there's Christopher with the heart for Stephen Avery Project. So Christopher is here. So Christopher will answer questions as we go if he can. Christopher is the moderator here on all of my pages, and he does all the heavy lifting here. Now, hopefully, glasses work for me to see my book. So, what we are reading is Wrongfully Abused, Making an Advocate for Stephen Avery by Jax West, which is self published on Amazon. So, that is the only place you can get it on Amazon. Um, And just know that Amazon like gets all the money for it. I get literally like 13 cents per book. Um, my husband is the one that, I told him what I wanted. So that's a picture of me as a child and then a picture of me the day that I sent the picture to my husband to mimic the Making a Murderer picture of Stephen, of his child picture. And then today, um, it took forever to upload the cover for both the front and the back. Um, and because I just couldn't figure out how to do it. And we screwed up too. So when you order it, you'll see there's nothing on the spine of the book. I don't know how to do that. So it's ugly on the spine. On the back of the book, my husband my husband is a gun enthusiast. He knows everything there is to know about guns. He has the rifle that they say was used, which wasn't. Um, and so this is a picture he took. I don't know how well you can see it on here, in our garage, of a shell casing on the ground because of the magic bullet that they found in Stephen's garage. So, and on the back of my book, it says, what happens after you watch a docu-series on Netflix and fall down the rabbit hole to find out the real story? This is the story of Jax West's involvement in the Stephen Avery case, what she discovered, the family members she has met, the people who have tried to stop her from exposing the truth. Millions of people have watched Making a Murderer, but not many have gone to the lengths Jax has to find out what happened to Teresa Halbach in October 2005. So this book goes over stuff from Stephen's case, but it is my history of the case and my thoughts. So the first thing you see when you open the book about the author. Now, I have not read any of this since it was published in 2022. So things will have changed. And so as I read stuff and have updates, I will give you updates. I also been planning for a while to write another book. And I think probably after however many sessions it's going to take us to read this book, that'll probably get me in the mindset to write my next book. Since there's been developments since 2022. About the author. Jax West has lived in the Chicago area her entire life. She has always been interested in true crime stories, but there was something about Stephen Avery's story that she just had to get involved. When she isn't advocating for the wrongfully accused, she is an activist and works in politics. She is married and had an adult son. Had, it should be has, so see, typo. Has an adult son, as well as a plethora of dogs, fish, and hippos. Update, my hippos died since then. I had hairless guinea pigs. They were adorable. Acknowledgements. There are so many people I want to thank for either helping me with writing this book or just being supportive over the years if I have dealt with the trolls over my support of this case. I first must thank my husband Jeff, as none of this would be possible without him. He has been there every step of the way. He has had to deal with my obsession on this case and go with me to Manitowoc on multiple occasions. Jeff has printed things for the rallies that weren't. So that's a typo. So it says for the rallies that weren't, and then had his business attacked for it online. So it should say that weren't used. Look at all the typos I'm coming up with forever. And I had multiple people edit this and read it. Whatever. He has had to listen to me talk about the case and bitch about the people trolling me. Jeff has made stickers for us to sell in the Justice with Jax Etsy shop, and he has had to print this book as well as design the cover and help me get it up on Amazon to sell. Thank you so much, Jeff, for all your support. And that reminds me, where is that? Hold on one second. It's got to be around right here somewhere because I keep it. I don't know where it is. Here it is. This is the first time Jeff printed it for me. So I have a friend who's thanked in there who she is a journalist. And I also know her from politics. And so she offered to edit my book for free. But she wouldn't read it electronically. She wanted a printed copy. So my husband printed it himself and binded it. And then she literally, let me find a good page, red penned it on that. And then I had to go through the electronic copy page by page looking at her edits and edit it. But then, and she had it, Dawn had it for like a year, and she only got to half. See where that thing is? So she had only done half of it. And so then I had to go over the other half myself. So, but just kind of a neat thing that I also have, and all the pictures are in it too, of the first time Jeff printed the book for me. And he made it all pretty with flowers. So there's the first manuscript. And then here's the final product. All right, so back to where I was reading. My son Ryan has watched some of Making a Murderer. I don't think he has seen the whole thing. He has had to listen to me talk about it as well. My son is my life, and I hope I make him proud as he makes me. My poor mother has had to worry about me every time I go to Manitowoc. She has watched Making a Murderer and comes to many of the live events I do. I know I make her proud when she sees me on her TV, when she watches me on YouTube. Sorry, my mom died in October. So, yeah, all right, sorry. I'm getting sad, and let's skip that. But my mom was so supportive, and but she hated when I would go to Manitowoc because she was afraid something was going to happen to me. And so she didn't want to know in advance I was going, but she was happy that almost every time I go, my husband goes with me. Okay. Thank you to my admin, Christopher, who just posted a link to this book on Amazon, who runs all my pages and sometimes gets on me to get back on track when I get lazy. Christopher does most of the hard work and deals with all day-to-day stuff while I watch Netflix and chill. He is my biggest cheerleader, and I really appreciate him. Christopher, I really like you. I also want to thank a couple of my longtime followers, Miley and Bryce. Miley, who I call my sexy girlfriend, has been there for me for years. Bryce always brings a smile to my face, and I enjoyed being his tour guide on all the sites in Manitowoc. And so when I wrote this, Bryce and I had only taken one trip to Manitowoc together, and I think now we've gone 3 times together. There are oh so many people who are part of my story, and I wish I could name you all. But know that I truly, another typo, because it says that I truly appreciative. So that I truly am appreciative of each one of you. I guess I should say, Christopher, what's going on here? I gave you this in advance too, and you didn't fix this stuff for me. You're fired. Thank you to Dawn for taking the time to edit some of this and get me on the right track. I know I am very long-winded and it can take a lot to get me to get to the point. Then we've got table of contents that I named all of the chapters. And so this first chapter is Who is Jax West? I was born on July 3rd, 1971, to very young parents who didn't particularly like each other. My mother was just 17 years old when she had me, and she never really wanted me. Wow, that's kind of a brutal thing to say, but yeah, that's truth. I grew up with her blaming me for her lost youth and marrying a man she didn't love. My parents had another child when I was 3, and they divorced when I was 4. My mother then moved in and later married the man she had been dating before my biological father. My father disappeared, and I haven't seen him since. My stepfather raised me from then on, and I call him my dad. And actually, I'm picking up my dad from the airport tonight. And he, as I said, I call him dad. My biological father is a father. The man who raised me is my dad. And I don't say stepfather. Technically, he's my stepfather, but he's my dad. The person who raises you should get the title dad, in my opinion. I have 3 half siblings, but I consider them my sisters and brother. No halves about it. I don't think about the fact that we have different fathers. We grew up poor, but my parents did the best they could to support 5 children. I was always the black sheep of my family. I resented my parents for making me watch my siblings who were 3, 6, 7, and 10 years younger than me. I married my high school boyfriend when I was just 20 years old. I started dating him when I was 14. I had my son when I was 22. My husband was basically the only boy I ever dated. We grew up together. Since I was from a broken marriage, I strongly felt that you had to just accept your spouse for who they are, flaws and all. As the years went by, the flaws got to be more and more. I did my best to ignore them. That made for a very unhappy marriage. After 21 years married and 27 together, we separated. It took almost 9 years to finalize our divorce. In that time, I started dating someone who had been a friend of mine. Once my divorce was final, we decided to get married after being together for 8 years. Next section, or chapter, is Jax's discovery of making a murderer. Natalie, since I just saw your thing, these lives always stay up here for 30 days. And that's why I also will upload it to the Justice with Jax YouTube channel, because Facebook only allows lives to be up for 30 days and then they delete them. So I upload it to YouTube and then we share that link here so you can go, so it can still be watched on YouTube on Justice with Jax. All right. I have always been interested in true crime stories. I have read many serial killer books, which are actually on the bookshelf right here above me. Charles Manson, Jeffrey Dahmer, Lori Dan, you name it. I have watched Paradise Lost I don't know how many times. I remember where I was the day the West Memphis 3 were freed on the Alford plea. I was in a car traveling to Arkansas, believe it or not, for a vacation. I even bought Damien Echols' book. I would watch all the alleged reality shows that would recreate the crimes. I am always looking for a new true crime, and I put these in quotes, true crime story to check out. In December of 2015, I was on Facebook and someone shared a post that was in my newsfeed telling people to check out Making a Murderer on Netflix. My then boyfriend, Jeff, was at work. I was bored, so I turned it on. I had never heard of this case or anything about it. This was the very Friday it was first broadcast on Netflix. I had no idea what I was about to see. While watching the episode, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It upset me tremendously how this guy, Stephen Avery, was so unbelievably screwed. It was clear to me that Stephen Avery was innocent. Nothing linked him to the crime whatsoever. In my opinion, his cousin didn't like him, was married to a deputy, so that's all they wrote. His cousin's friend immediately told the victim that the assailant sounded like Stephen. Where's the mute? Okay, I had to find where I was. His cousin's friend immediately told the victim that the assailant sounded like Stephen. Perhaps they made the evidence fit the narrative. Stephen had multiple witnesses. He had 6-day-old twins, for Pete's sake. He didn't have the time or the motive to commit murder. That should have been alleged rape, because I'm talking about Penny Bernstein here. Was Stephen a pillar of society in Manitowoc County? Not even close. But just because someone isn't from the right side of the tracks, it doesn't mean that they would assault some woman on the beach. Without skipping a beat, I moved right into the second episode. I am unsure of what I am seeing. I pause it. I didn't understand. I thought this was going to be 10 episodes. Was this all on the same guy? Or was this like a different case each episode? Then I see it is all about the same guy. How can they stretch this out into 10 episodes? I thought everything was tied up with a bow on this case in the first episode. There's really something more to it that would cover 10 episodes? I continue watching the second episode. I start to get mad because at that point, I'm thinking that everything the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department did to him, Stephen has now committed murder, and that's what the rest of the episodes would be about. It is called Making a Murderer. I get it now. I was mad because that poor man served 18 years for a crime he didn't commit, and I'm sure you build up a ton of anger about that. I didn't have any facts yet. I was just assuming that Stephen was going to be found guilty. As the episodes progressed, I saw that Stephen was once again innocent of what he was being charged with. I was incredulous. How could anyone just automatically think the guy is guilty after knowing he was framed for a prior case and that the people who framed him were also involved in this one? Is this the Twilight Zone? How could these people get away with this not once, but twice? I, once again, assumed that the remaining episodes would expose the corruption of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, and that by the end of the series, Stephen would be riding off into the sunset a free man. Oh, how wrong I was. I couldn't stop watching the series. By the time I got to the 4th episode, I don't know if I can even put into words the anger that filled me. To this day, it is very hard for me to watch Brendan Dassey's interrogations. That poor boy. I kept screaming at my television, "Are you fucking kidding me?" I punched my couch multiple times. How could that happen? Weren't there laws that you can't interrogate a minor without their parents' knowledge or consent? How do you call yourself a human when you lead a sweet boy like that with a low IQ to say that he was guilty of rape and murder? It was obvious to anyone with half a brain that Brendan had no clue what was going on during his interrogation. He thought he would answer what they asked of him, and then he would go back to school to turn in an assignment. He was looking forward to watching WrestleMania. In his opinion, they were the authorities, so he had no reason not to trust them. They told him to tell them what they wanted to know, and then he would be allowed to go back to school. I have a 28-year-old son. Well, he's 33 now, I think. He was born in 93. You guys do the math. I'm really bad with numbers, so don't say I'm a bad parent. While he has an above average IQ, I did speak to him about this episode and told him in the future if he is ever questioned by the police for any reason, he is to tell them he can't speak without a lawyer present. That's not something I raised my son to do. I always trusted the police. If you know you're innocent, it is best if you just clear it up quickly and be done with it. Since I am innocent, there isn't any evidence to the contrary, so it is in my best interest to just answer their questions. There's no reason to draw it out. If I ask for a lawyer, I just look guilty. So just answer them and go home. Now I have told my son to never answer their questions, no matter what they are. I don't care if they ask you, did you see a cat in the tree? The Avery Dassey case has taught me, I should have brought water up here, that law enforcement have their own agenda and they are going to make the pieces fit how they want. This is not all law enforcement, mind you. There are good and bad in every line of work. But when your freedom is at risk, it is better to err on the side of caution. I moved right into the 5th episode. I just can't stop watching. When my boyfriend came home from work, I just had to stop the episode at that point. We had dinner, and I just could not stop talking about this documentary. I didn't want to tell him about it. I wanted him to see it for himself and to form his own opinion. I wanted to know if he saw what I saw. So after dinner, I started the documentary from the beginning and we could watch it together. Nope, it wasn't just me. I saw Jeff get extremely agitated during episode 4, just when I did. He became enraged with what happened to Brendan. He ranted and raved about the injustice and, quote, that poor kid, unquote. We didn't stop there. We were up until 4 a.m. and watched all 10 episodes straight through. We were both forever changed by watching that documentary. We couldn't get it out of our minds. Is this really where the story ends? Next chapter is Jax's search for the truth. They don't have page numbers on here. I say they when I self-published it, so that's my fault that there's no page numbers on here. So, note to self, note to Christopher. My next book, I should have page numbers. I couldn't get this case out of my head. Both Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey were really found guilty. How is that remotely possible? I needed to know more. What has happened to them since? Were they out of prison now? I just couldn't let the documentary go. I started searching everything I could find about the case. I had to know what the real story was. I wasn't going to just go by what I use the word just a lot. I need to edit that myself out of saying just all the time. Okay, so I wasn't going to just go by what I just saw on Netflix. I looked on Facebook. I even ended up on Reddit and fell down that rabbit hole for a bit. On Reddit, they talked about donations for StephenAveryCase.org. And I believe that website's still up. Where they were trying to build all the transcripts and every piece of evidence they could. I donated $50 towards the cause. I spent full weekdays. This is back when I didn't have a job. Adult story time, Jocelyn. Yep. I spent full weekdays scouring through every testimony, watching every interrogation. I just could not get enough. I was someone who believed in the death penalty. All the alleged true crime shows would always spotlight how they got the bad guys, so I kept waiting to find out if Stephen Avery was really guilty. But all of the evidence just confirmed, sorry, my dog Willow now is whining downstairs because she hears my voice and she wants my attention. But all of the evidence just confirmed that what I took away from Making a Murderer was right. These guys were innocent. I couldn't just let it go. There's just again. That should be a drinking game. Well, it's only 10:24 a.m. here, but maybe those of you catching the replay can have a drinking game for every time I say the word just. I had to see the evidence for myself. In January, my boyfriend, some friends of ours, and I drove up to Avery Salvage Yard. I was convinced at that time that George Zipperer, appointment number 3, but law enforcement later changed it to saying he was the second appointment to force their narrative that Stephen was Teresa Halbach's last stop, was guilty. So we drove to his house as well. I timed how long it took us to get from the salvage yard to the Zipperers. We drove through the quarry attached to the salvage yard. I saw how huge it was, and there were so many places a body and even a car could be hidden and wouldn't ever be found again. We saw a road in the quarry right that led right to the back of the salvage yard where Teresa Halbach's RAV4 was found. This furthered my belief that Stephen and Brendan had been framed. Pause. So it's written in my notes when Stephen called me yesterday at work because we were talking about Earl, and that's going to be the live in just a little over a half hour where I talk about Earl. And so actually it's my last note on here that Stephen said he would drive through the salvage yard all the time when he was coming home late at night. He would go through that way so nobody saw him coming in. So, and I'm sure I talk about that at some point in this as well, but and I'll talk about that when I go into the Earl thing. Anyway, back to the book. Famed defense attorney Kathleen Zellner took over Stephen's case in January. Her office was literally 5 minutes away from my house. I decided to reach out to her. Here is my email to her on January 26, 2016. Hi, I've reached out before, but please don't think of me as a crazy person. I know you're very busy, and I don't know if you've received my prior emails. I, like many people, have been deeply affected by the Stephen Avery case. It just makes you want to get involved. I live near, and I gave her, because I live near two very busy streets, and since she lives in, literally my county, she would know, and so she would know how close that is. So I am not far from your office. I do not have a job, and I am not looking for one. I actually am president of a not-for-profit and am used to donating my time for causes. I would love to help out in any way. Whatever you would need someone to do, I just want to be active in trying to right this wrong. It has made me question everything I've ever thought about our legal system, and I just want to help. Can you please respond to this either way, even if it's just a form letter, so I know it's been received and I don't keep emailing when I'm sure you have plenty to wade through? Thank you so much for your time and all that you do. I just watched Dream Killer the other night too. Just drink 2 drinks. Just makes me sad to see what obviously happens far more than I was ever aware of. Jax West. Here's the response I got the next day. Ms. West, thank you for your interest in helping in the fight to free Stephen Avery. At this time, we are not in need to volunteers. That's what it said. Should that change, we will be in touch. I continued reading everything I could find about the case, but I wasn't content to just read about it. I had to find out how I could help in any way. Next chapter, Jax's MAM events. And every time we say MAM, so like we have the group here, MAM Gossip, a lot of people, if they're new to Making a Murderer or, they're not online all the time, we get the questions, what's MAM? So I'm not talking down to people who know what it is, and I'm not talking down to people who don't know what it is when I explain to you MAM is just stands for Making a Murderer. And when my friend Dawn was editing my book too, she would go through and want me to change things to be more professional. But so like anytime I type that I mean the word because, I always write CUZ, cuz. And she would tell me I have to change every one of those to because. And it's like, but that's when I type, when you see me type here, I always do CUZ. And, I don't want a book that I write, especially a book that's about me, to be phony and not how I talk. And so if I'm to say Making a Murderer, I write MAM. So it's still like that in the book. On February 23rd, I Facebook messaged the Stephen Avery Project as they had a post saying that Lieutenant Mark Wiegert and Special Agent Tom Fassbender were going to speak at the Illinois Division International Association for Identification Convention. A long title. I could not believe they were actually going to brag about what they had done to Brendan Dassey. The event was going to be held in the town next to mine. I couldn't do nothing about it. I started organizing a protest for it. The Stephen Avery Project was considering staging a protest and were looking for volunteers. I reached out and offered my help. They messaged me back within the hour and told me to call them. That is how I first met Curtis. He asked me to do all the legwork for the protest. I first called the village of Naperville to find out if I needed a permit. They said I had to talk to the police department. I called the police department. I was worried, as this is a wealthy town, so I thought I may get hassled. But I couldn't have been more wrong. The police were really cool. They told me I did not need a permit. I had a right to protest, but there were rules that had to be followed. You had to keep moving at all times. You cannot block the entrances or the street. You cannot be on property. You can't have signs, shirts, etc. that have anything vulgar on them or shout obscenities. What up, Debbie? It's a Debbie show. I didn't see anything objectionable to any of those rules. I didn't know anything about organizing a protest or advocating for the wrongfully accused. A girl who I grew up with, who had lived in a house behind me, was a lot of typos in this one. A house behind me was on a friend of mine on Facebook. So she grew up behind me and we were Facebook friends. I knew from posts she had made that her husband had something to do with the Amanda Knox case. I reached out to her and asked if her husband would have any advice for me for organizing a protest. She said he would, and she put me in contact with him. And now since then, and probably since writing this book, I've met Amanda Knox. Okay, so it turned out that he runs an organization called Injustice Anywhere. I don't know if that organization actually still exists. I haven't looked into it. They advocate for the wrongfully accused. Things just snowballed from there. He started freebrendan.org and had me write articles for the page. Oh, I don't even know if freebrendan.org is still up. And I don't know if when I was writing this book, if I went to, thank you, Debbie, if I went to freebrendan.org and if the articles I wrote were still there. But I think everything I wrote was on my computer. He also started the Free Brendan Facebook page, and I was put in charge of all the content on that page. Anything I put on the page would automatically go on our Free Brendan Now Twitter account too. But let's get back to the protest. Now I was writing a lot of posts about this event. I was doing everything I could to bring attention to it. Curtis only wanted to do the press for it. I don't care about that stuff, so I compiled all of the local news outlets and sent it to him to do, which he never did anything with the information. It ended up not mattering it, though, as the speaking engagement at the law enforcement convention was canceled. I called the location and they confirmed that the event was canceled. They didn't say why. I called the law enforcement agency and they wouldn't say why either. I asked if it was rescheduled and they said it was not rescheduled at that time. I just didn't trust them to not do this on the down low, since there was now attention on them and they knew there was going to be protesters at the event. But the event never happened. Ha ha. Win for me. Yeah, Twitter, now X. What was next? Stephen Avery's lawyers in Making a Murderer, Dean Strang and Jerry Buting, were doing a speaking tour. They were kicking it off in Milwaukee on March 18, 2016. I bought tickets. Here's the article I wrote on that event. So this Okay, so this would have been something that was on freebrendan.org. A recap of a conversation on making a murderer with attorney Strang and Buting by Jax West. If you're reading this, or listening to this, now in this case, then you have become obsessed with the Netflix 10-episode documentary Making a Murderer. Oh, I just got a notification that someone, Steve Holloway, just said, sounds like you're using his case to get an audience for your book. No, I get hardly, this book's been out for how many years? And I get pennies. I've made less than $200 on this book. I have given Stephen over $200 over the years. Um, and I don't care if you buy my book or not. But I get asked for all the time of my articles and such that I write on the case. So I put it all together in a book. Buy it or don't. I don't really care. And if I wanted people to buy my book, would I now be reading it? So you're getting it for free. But anyway, squirrel. Absolutely not doing this so you buy my book. Don't care. All right. So some of this is going to be rehashing what I already said in a prior thing. I came across it by accident in December of 2015, not knowing anything about it. I was instantly hooked and binged the entire documentary series in one night. I then started searching for more information on the internet to find out what wasn't included in the documentary. I even fell down the Reddit rabbit hole for a few days. I contributed money to StephenAveryCase.org to get all the documents, pictures, and interrogations released so anyone could have access to it. I traveled the 3 hours to go see the Avery salvage yard, quarry, and the Zipper house for myself. I've joined countless Facebook groups that talked about the documentary. I even went so far as to reach out to Stephen Avery's current lawyer because her office is literally 5 minutes from my house and offered to be her bitch for free. I told Kathleen Zellner that I would help however needed. But enough about me. Let's get to what you really want to know about the event. Bryce is here. Hi, Bryce. I attended a conversation of Making a Murderer with attorneys Dean Strang and Jerry Buting on March 18th, 2016 at Riverside Theater in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It is about a 90-minute drive from my home. The doors opened at 7 p.m. and I was there waiting to get in. The lawyers were introduced and interviewed by Mitch Tyke from WUWM Lake Effect Radio. It started at 8:09 p.m. I literally when I go to these things, I bring a notebook and I take notes. So like even when I go to court, I'm always writing on the page what time court started and what time it ended. So that's why it would be on here that it started at 8:09 p.m. because that's how weird I am in my notes. They sat on the stage in some chairs with the spotlight on them. There was a big screen and monitor behind them, which showed the courthouse. I took 2 pages of notes in the dark and will now go over the highlights. The attorneys said they would not talk about anything that was covered by client-attorney privilege. They are doing this tour because they are inundated with questions about the case. So very similar to what I just said about my book. So people would say they were doing that tour to make money. I know, try saying that fast. But no, they're messaged and called and emailed about the case. So now this is a way that you have an audience and you could talk about it. And people like me are happy to pay that money to go see them talk. Oh, sorry. I'm like, what's that noise? My husband is working on a friend of his truck outside, so that was a drill or something. They are not doing this tour because they are doing this tour because they are inundated with questions about the case. Dean Strang is not on social media and doesn't plan to ever be. I don't know. Did Dean Strang ever get on social media since then? I don't know. You can find Jerry Buting at jbuting on Twitter. Jerry Buting has been practicing law for 30 years, and Dean Strang is coming up on 28 years practicing law. They were told that this was the biggest criminal case in Wisconsin history. Why did they take the case? Dean Strang said Stephen Avery was the most detested man in Wisconsin. A lawyer wants to do public good. He doesn't want to sound corny. Dean Strang also said publicity brings business. Jerry Buting said it is not common for two lawyers from two different firms to try the same case together. Dean Strang said Jerry Buting is better than him at scientific and forensic evidence. He joked that Jerry is not abrasive, like people have said. Dean said they acted as good cop, bad cop. And then the pictures in my book are only in black and white, but there's a picture I took of the screen as we were waiting for it to start. Jerry Buting, because it's cheaper to print it in black and white. In this, it's in color. And the pictures have been posted on Stephen Avery Project and Free Brendan and all that you would see them in color. Jerry Buting said they were both wary of the Making a Murderer project when they took the case. Dean Strang said one of the filmmakers is also a lawyer, so she knew not to film things that were privileged, etc. He said the filmmakers kept their word with them. Jerry Buting said no scenes were scripted and they weren't told any of the questions in advance. They were good at being a fly on the wall. So he and Jerry would brainstorm with each other and with the documentarians there. Jerry Buting and Dean Strang stayed in two private furnished apartments, which were on top of each other. They talked about the scene of Ash Wednesday. Jerry Buting said he and Dean are Catholic, and so are the Hallbachs, so they made sure to find a church that wouldn't interfere with the family. They had the Ash Wednesday service ashes on their foreheads when the filmmakers joined them and asked if they wanted them to wipe the ashes off first, but they told them no, because that's not what you do. Jerry Buting said there were a lot of negative vibes towards him and Dean Strang in town. They know that's part of the job. They did their best to stay away from the Hallbach family. Dean Strang wishes the prosecutors had worked with the filmmakers. Jerry Buting said he had no idea they would refuse to cooperate. He said the filmmakers did what they could. That's why he said they would show the questions from the press. And there's a little black and white picture of them talking at the event. Jerry Buting didn't want to hold press conferences every day, but the special prosecutor said he would be doing one every other day, and Mike Hallbach would be doing the other days. So they had to do them to give a balanced side. Dean Strang said they got the prosecution to agree to only talk about that day in court in case the jurors were cheating and watching coverage of the news coverage of the case, which I'm sure they were. And I mean, I'll just be honest, if I was serving on a case and maybe if I'm ever put in a jury pool again, because I have served on a jury, not a murder trial, but maybe that would kick me off by me saying this right now, but I absolutely would look at the news. I know, that's bad. Jerry Buting said they had no editorial control of Making a Murderer. He joked that he only had 8 Twitter followers prior to the documentary. Jerry watched it a week before it premiered on Netflix. Dean Strang watched it after it aired. He said he lived it and wasn't eager to watch it. Jerry Buting said he had to talk to Stephen Avery before it aired, but he did not binge watch it. Dean Strang reminded the audience that someone lost their life and the family had a hole torn in them that will never close. He said the rape, and now I have in parentheses, there was no rape but an attempted one, victim, Penny Bernstein, never intended to get it wrong, and then this case brings it all back up for her. Jerry Buting said this was the most difficult case he's had to disengage from. For the judge to say Stephen Avery was probably the most dangerous man that has ever been in his courtroom was difficult for him to accept. Dean Strang said Stephen Avery is one of 2 clients he has had that is serving life without the possibility of parole. He said, quote, "You carry this with you," unquote. He said life without the possibility of parole wasn't available in Wisconsin until 1990 and was supposed to almost never be used, but instead it is widely used. He said it's a social death sentence. Dean said prisoners would rather be executed rather than no hope of parole while in a cage. Dean Strang said, when you believe your client is innocent, it makes the trial easier. Many guilty people say they're innocent. Dean questioned the lack of blood. Authorities ripped up the carpet and took the paneling off the wall. He said nothing the prosecution said in the press conferences actually happened. Dean Strang said some lawyers want to win for the sake of winning. He thinks the law needs to be stricter on what lawyers can say. Not the media, but the lawyers. Jerry Buting said the vast majority of prosecutors don't do these kinds of press conferences. For Ken Kratz to start out by saying, if you're under 15, you should leave the room, unquote, everyone just turns up the volume. He said the prosecution said a lot worse in the press conferences than the documentary showed, like claiming they knew what the poor woman was saying. It sickened the audience. Jerry Buting said they can take your child out of class to interrogate them, and they do it every day. He said guilty people assert their Miranda rights. Dean Strang said if this was 1976 instead of 2006, Brendan Dassey would probably be taken to juvenile court and they would protect his childhood. But it was 2006. This book's never been read, so these pages are all stiff and new, and I'm trying to turn it and they're sticking together. And I have this page marked because there's something that I would talk about in here. How long is this going to be? Am I even going to be able to? Because I need to end this in 15 minutes to talk about what Stephen wanted me to talk about. Then they talked about the read technique. Here is how Wikipedia defines it. Because I've done live videos before where we just talk about the read technique, so I need this section marked. Quote, the read technique is a method of questioning suspects to try to assess their credibility. Supporters argue that the read technique is useful in extracting information from otherwise unwilling suspects, while critics have charged the technique can elicit, and now this is underlined, false confessions from innocent persons, especially children, unquote. Jerry Buting said the read technique was designed in the 1950s and that 90% of police in the country are trained to do it. It connects anxiety to lying. Police will make those being questioned anxious and then tell them they are lying. They will give them a polygraph and then lie to them and tell them they failed it. They will say the machine doesn't lie and you are. The police are allowed to lie about evidence. The courts have lost sight of the fact that vulnerable individuals can give false confessions. Most people say they would never confess to a crime they didn't commit, but some police interrogators will not accept their denials and will lie to them. Then the accused will come up with a lie, and then they don't remember it and will get tripped up, and the jury will hear that. Dean Strang said the interrogators claim false evidence like they have your fingerprints or your buddy said it was your idea. The accused then think they won't be believed in court and will get more time in prison, so they lie. Jerry Buting said they used to be held incommunicado and beat, but now they have the read technique, which is psychological. Jerry Buting said the filmmakers of Making a Murderer tried to capture the major items that were in dispute: the blood, the magic key, the bones, and the burn pit. They had to leave things out like the sweat DNA on the hood latch. Jerry Buting wanted the audience to know that there is, I now have in all capitals and in bold, no such thing as sweat DNA. The prosecutor, Ken Kratz, tried to say it wasn't from blood, but it was from sweat. Yet the prosecution's expert didn't do a presumptive test. Jerry said they had an answer for everything. The prosecution's analyst was in the car moments earlier and didn't change their gloves before touching the hood latch. They did leave out defense evidence too, the bones, where the body was burned. The state said the rivet was from Daisy Fuentes jeans, which were sold at Kohl's. They used a magnet, but didn't find the big metal button that buttoned up the jeans anywhere. So she was burned somewhere else. But the filmmakers had to make editorial decisions. Dean Strang wished they could have shown the jury selection. They spent a week doing that. But then there was the press conference before the case. He is not critical of the omission and knows that prospective jurors and current jurors cannot be filmed by law. The attorneys talked for a while about jury duty. Jerry Buting said he was called once but was disqualified and then brought into chambers, so he didn't say anything to anyone else. He asked how the jury could not find reasonable doubt. He said, if you won't serve, then you can't be critical. He said, it's typically retired and young people who serve on juries, so it's not a jury of your peers, which you are entitled to. The poor always lose. Jerry Buting said Wisconsin has a good public defender program, and 70% of cases go through that. The rest go to lawyers who are only paid $40 an hour. Wisconsin has the lowest paid attorneys in the country, and he thinks it's time to raise that rate. Now remember, this was 2016, so I don't know what it is currently. Dean Strang said 80% of people are too poor to pay for a lawyer, and to be poor is to be presumed a criminal. Jerry Buting said he tries to be sensitive to the victims, but it is not his role to defend them. They are re-victimized when the wrong person is convicted and the real perpetrator gets away with it. Dean Strang says he tries to make sure to not always take away their humanity. Jerry Buting likes that the documentary portrays the pain and anguish the defendant's family goes through. Jerry said he does embrace being a role model for defense attorneys with integrity when you usually only see them portrayed as sleazebags. Jerry Buting wants us to know that the perp walk, where they are in black and white stripes, shackled, and wearing mitts, are staged events that law enforcement does to show they are guilty and dangerous. He said we wouldn't prejudge that, even if you hear the person in custody have supposedly confessed. How can we help? Dean Strang said there are lots of charitable groups you can donate your time or money to. He suggests we take this conversation home and simply talk about it. He said democracy begins in conversation. This is where it ended at 9:48 p.m. I will say I greatly enjoyed it. I will be going to it again when it comes to Chicago in June, and I'm going to see Brendan Dassey's current lawyers, Stephen Drizzen and Laura Nyrider, talk about his case in Chicago in April. This case completely changed my outlook on our justice system. It is sad, but I had to tell my 22-year-old son, which I've already talked about, that if he is ever questioned by the police for any reason, he has to say he can't talk until there is a lawyer present. Until making a murderer, I thought if I am innocent, that it is much easier if I just explain, and if I ask for a lawyer, then I am thought of as guilty. Now I know differently. It doesn't matter what you look like, where you're from, who you are. We are all potential Stephen and Brendans. One last thing before I let you go. We are staging a protest against the two officers who coerced Brendan Dassey using the Reed technique when they are speaking at a law enforcement convention in Naperville, Illinois on April 26. It starts at 10 a.m. and it is at the NIU Conference Center located at 1120 East Deal Road. So mind you, this was written right after I had gone to this event. So at that time, the protest was scheduled and happening. In the meantime, I had reached out to Stephen Avery's niece and Brendan Dassey's cousin, Carla Chase. She was calling herself the family spokesperson and was running the Facebook group. I asked her if I could interview either Brendan's mother, Barb Tadek, or Brendan himself, as I wanted to write an article on who is Brendan Dassey. Back then, when you Googled his name, his uncle came up. I really didn't like that Brendan Dassey was lost in Stephen Avery's shadow. And I've had my husband make a graphic about that, and I believe that's on Free Brendan. Um, Carla told me she would ask Barb. I was then told I needed to talk to Brendan Dassey's lawyers. I talked to one of his lawyers, Laura Nyrider, and she couldn't have been nicer. She said she regularly followed what I did on Free Brendan. But then she explained the various reasons why I couldn't do the interview. She said she didn't want to deter me from all the enthusiasm I have with the case. I told her this isn't about me getting an interview. All I care about is what is best for Brendan Dassey. I was able to write a small article on Brendan where I asked him tame questions in a letter on things like his favorite color, Pokemon, etc. Let's laugh, Barb. Nothing about his case at all, just getting to know who he was as a person. After the Strang Buting show, I met up with Curtis, Carla, her husband Stacy Chase, Barb Taddock, Stephen Avery's sister and Brendan Dassey's mother, her husband Scott Taddock, the dismissed juror from Stephen Avery's case, Richard Maher, and some others. From that point on, I started talking with Carla daily. Press 4. And I think since we're almost at 11 and I am at the start of another page that I don't have any of my pages numbered, so that's bad of me. That's where we're going to end this first installment of reading my book. Oh, this is funny that this is what I'm going to use to be my bookmark. I'm going to use this. And I'm sure this is something that's talked about in my book later. So this is something that Buting gave me when I went to their Chicago show. That I'll talk about then, but I'll use it as my bookmark. I don't know when I will do my next live to read my book. The reason I have scheduled this to be on a weekend is, for one, I work weekdays 9:30 to 4:30, and so the earliest I can do a live, I get home at 5, so it's like 5:30 p.m. Chicago time, and for around the world, that's not a great time. I have found that this is the best compromise. So people can get on live if they wanted to. And next Saturday I have an event, so I can't go live on Saturday. So I will figure out. So we may have to do some of these that will be on weeknights, but I know a lot of people watch these recorded. So, when I decide I'm going to go live, Christopher always makes the Facebook event, so RSVP to the Facebook event, because then you'll get reminders, and then he also posts it in all the groups. I'm going to have to just sober up now, Jax. Yeah, just hot. And I'm going to end this live, but then I'm going to create another one right now so we can talk about what Stephen and I talked about on the phone yesterday. So this will be ended. Another one will be titled something about Earl, and then we will chat then till either I have nothing else to say about Earl, which I find that hard to believe, or Melissa Kaluzinski calls me. So thank you everybody who joined me I'm calling it chapter 1, even though I'm reading more than one chapter each time. I'm reading however long an hour gets me through. But thank you for joining me on chapter 1 of Wrongfully Abused, Making an Advocate for Stephen Avery, that if you want, you can get on Amazon. If you don't want to pay for it, don't. And stay tuned to these live videos where you get it for free. So, as always, investigation continues. See you in a few.